Well, hello everyone. Welcome to July's Randwick Research Seminar Series. My name is Steve Palmer. I'm the Industry and Innovation Lead for the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct, and today it's my pleasure to be the chair of this session. And I'm introducing the two speakers today, who will be Professor Chris White, who will be presenting on Maridulu, Budyari, Gumal, the Sydney Partnership for Health, Education, Research and Enterprise, shortened to SPHERE. He'll be giving us an update on what he's doing in that space. And then to follow, we have my colleague Sam McFedries, who's the Translational Research Lead for the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct. And she's talking about translational research projects, enablers and opportunities without geographical borders. But first, just like to remind everyone that if you're online, please use the Slido link to ask questions. So please log in now and ask your question through Slido. But first, it's my great pleasure to introduce Chris. Chris, please.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to add my acknowledgement of country. We're meeting on, SPHERE is such a big place, I can't remember where I am. So this is Gadigal country. Sovereignty was never ceded, always was Aboriginal land. And to anybody online or here who identifies as Aboriginal, acknowledge that, and welcome to elders past, present and emerging. So how do I move this forward? Okay, so this is an update on SPHERE, and even after 7 years I've got people still asking me what is SPHERE. And so it's an NHMRC accredited research translation centre. So it was an initiative that was actually born from a report that in the Australian context we've got quite a unique research environment where your academic institutions and a lot of activity in healthcare happens in the federally funded SPHERE, and yet we've got health services that are delivering with some overlap in a state-based funded vehicle. And so the opportunity for there to be integration between academic and health services looked like too good an opportunity to pass up. So there's very strict criteria that we have to actually perform to acquire that NHMRC accreditation. There was a carrot at one stage that there was a considerable amount of funding going into the RTCs, but that has stopped. And in fact, we are now prohibited from applying for the very grants that we were initially applying for. So there's still, in that changing landscape, there's still a consensus amongst all the partners to continue to work together because of the unique opportunity that provides. But what we need to do is reduce any duplications. And so, for instance, at the same time that this collaborative effort was underway across LHDs and across universities, you actually had the precinct setting up, which was again across LHDs and across universities. And so the reason to present here and to keep a connection into the precincts is to make sure that we don't then duplicate, for instance, in commercialisation or in certain research areas. We're here to supplement and to fill the gaps around the various researchers and research efforts and supplement what they're doing, but not duplicate it. So we need to remove duplications and inefficiencies and enhance any complementary skills and collaboration so to be supported at all times. Okay, and across the SPHERE landscape, there are 5 precincts, or what we perceive to be health academic interactions. So we've got the Randwick, we've got Darlinghurst, Ultimo, Liverpool and Macarthur at Campbelltown. And so we're keen to not duplicate but connect them up and highlight the excellences at each site and supplement and connect where we can. So we've got a broad-based strategy which has been endorsed, which works on 4 pillars to move the work forward. And I think I've highlighted that we need to connect the precincts in ways that capture innovations and scale quickly. And my own personal bias is that then performs the framework on which we can actually share data between us, because there's a lot of siloed activity which would be capacity building if we could actually connect people up people and their data in a unique way. So we have clinical academic groups and enablers, and I'll show you a schematic of how that goes together. And there have been some key operational and service-based changes that have required mitigation, particularly with sustainability, which is Sphere was ambitious in its setup. It was, it asked a lot from its members, and that's usually that's a recognised strategy where you would invest more at startup, but you need to get to a maintenance phase. And so we're working on the forecasting to be at about half the funding that we had previously, and still provide a range of services that our customers want. So that's the strategy, which are the 4 pillars of basically collaborate widely. Okay, work with everybody. It's research without borders. Amplify and uplift knowledge where you can, so that there is the ability to scale, add impact, and translate your... And an important point for these research translation centres is it's not so much about translational research, it's about getting research into practice. So it's a research translation centre rather than about translational research. It's got a very specific directive. So we start at clinical trials. By the time you've got clinical trials, you've just got proof of concept that the thing works, but you haven't actually got implementation, and you haven't done it at scale. So that's the niche we're supposed to be targeting. So we have structures that I'll highlight and how they're going to change the way they work. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but the irony after 6 years was that as I indicated, the reason to set Sphere up in the first place was to break down barriers or silos between institutions, universities and LHDs, and break down barriers. And there's a lot of energy, and I was actually embedded in one of the CAGs, which is musculoskeletal. My background's in osteoporosis. And there was a lot of energy where we were actually working with people that we hadn't worked with before in our area of expertise. So I was talking to people at Southwest Sydney, and we basically created a virtual institute in musculoskeletal health, and that happened across numerous disease domains. The irony was that we didn't then work with anybody in cancer or anybody in any of the others. And so after a period of time, because we're tribal by nature, we actually then re-siloed just with different structures, right? And so without disrupting that too much, we need that next piece of energy, and this will show you the strategy of how we're going to do that to get those working across those partnerships. So this was the organisation I walked into in September, when the funding was a little more ample than it's going to be going forward. So the bottom line of this is all going to be, it is currently subject to restructure. It hasn't yet been endorsed, so I can't show you what it's going to. But needless to say that when you've got project managers in every single clinical academic group, and you've got 16 clinical academic groups, and you've got a number of platforms, I think this had a total of about 16 FTE across it. So that's a hefty employment bill, and so there will be some rationalisation, even though I can't. We're submitting that to the council. Once it's endorsed, we'll get back to you, but it's going to be leaner and meaner and hungrier than this one. Okay, so here's the problem we're trying to address, and I call it lost in translation. Now, I'm a clinician scientist, and so I can have an idea. I did a PhD decades ago, right? But I've been I've been manning the barricades of health services for 30 years. And even if I could develop and design and get proof of concept, and I've done a few little baby projects, okay, and get it to a prototype, that's my problem, is actually getting that getting that proof of concept and design and process, okay? So I see a lot of patients and I can implement quickly, and I can have really good ideas, usually born of frustration, like, isn't there a machine that can do this or something, you know? I've always found frustration very useful for the best ideas. But I'm lost in translation at that centrepiece. Whereas if you're an academic and or a clinician, but particularly academic, very good at ideas, right? We're not quite, well, what you need is exposure to the community that says, of the infinite number of ideas that you can have, which are the ones you actually should be answering, right? So a lot of academics are very, well, not a lot of academia can be, I need to be careful saying this, they can answer questions nobody asked. So who is asking the question? Is it your supervisor? Is it the granting body? Or is it actually the patient? And so the thing about these is that with proper engagement with community, of the infinite questions that you could ask, you'll narrow it down to the ones they actually want to answer. And then you can let the brains run and do the brainstorming and brain thinking and creative. So of the idea, but infinite ideas, they know how to do proof of concept, they know how to do design, but not seeing patients means you've got an implementation block. So this slide defines the problem between the two parties. So what do we then do? Okay, so this is Sphere. This is what we walked into. There are 16 CAGs, clinical academic groups, led by a democratic structure that, you know, it has a process around how it's identified. You might also, I'm talking at the Sydney Children's Hospital, so you might notice that we've got creating healthy futures, we've got early life determinants, and we've got maternal, newborn and women's health. So within the newborns component and you've actually got some duplications there, which we can address. You don't have to remove identity to remove duplication. You can still maintain identity and then just put in your back office a process that ensures there's no duplication, right? So, but there's 16 of those. And these platforms are research enablers, so how to innovate, consumer and community involvement, knowledge transfer, implementation science. Okay, but those are agnostic to disease. They're enablers for how you get your idea and your evidence into practice. So that's quite a chunky system. I'm going to try to show you how this goes together functionally, okay? And then the strategic step that we're undertaking to make it, to deliver that second piece I mentioned about changing the way we work together. So let's understand the players. As I said, it's a 50-50 relationship between universities and health services. Behind the health services, does this have a... This doesn't... does this move? Are you seeing a...
Yeah, slow down a bit.
Fantastic. Okay. Now, behind the LHDs, behind the local health districts and health networks, okay, and Sydney Children's Hospital has a split personality because it's across two of these things. That's actually an idea. That's actually quite useful because you'll be able to compare the outputs from the two and see, you know, so what is actually a disadvantage can be turned into an advantage. You've got South East Sydney, South West, St Vincent's and Sydney Children's Hospital Network, Randwick, okay? But behind them, you've got a large mass of resources, particularly the Office of Health and Medical Research, which governs many things, but includes ethics, research and governance. And so all of the Regis database is all sitting within there. We do have the Cancer Institute, which really makes a big difference to how that clinical academic group works with and integrates across the platform. So the bottom line is having a government agency behind you does actually make a big difference to the to the scale of your operation and the questions you can ask and the projects you can deliver. So that's an important New South Wales funder. You do have other Ministry of Health, the ACI and eHealth, of course, because that's actually where the data is sitting. And so unlocking that is an important priority. I'll call you back later, mate. Fantastic. Okay. Now, behind the universities and the medical research institutes are they're more disease, they're more linear, they're more focused and pillared, and the universities have, behind there, what I haven't shown on this is the depth that they go back into the organisation in biomedical engineering, AI, data management. It's huge. But what I would like to say is, the brains is here, and the heavy lifting, is over here. And so we should do something. So I've just paraphrased the McKeon report, which is how do we get together? And because you've got something that we need, we've got something that you need to see, and let's work together. So it's based on collaboration. So what they did were set up these clinical academic groups, and they're the 16 clinical academic groups. And as I indicated earlier, there's a lot of disruptive energy in 2017 when these came together. And I was buried in, so I highlighted it in musculoskeletal health. But because I'm osteoporosis, that's a disease of ageing. And so I had a working relationship with people in age and ageing, and, looking for those sort of connections. Those would be my natural partners across this organisation, right? But so I was working with people across this network and doing things that were that we weren't capable of doing before. So on that premise, Sphere worked. And so the idea was that they would pour the funding into each of those CAGs. So the yearly contributions were, council approved, but allocated to, and those were sort of the seed funding ideas that led to a lot of activity coming out of each of those CAGs, right? So what you then had were the enablers, the strategic platforms, as enablers cutting across that you could actually go to if you thought you needed something in consumer engagement, or you needed something in implementation, or you needed something in, and some of these, stood up and fell away. The innovation platform, I think they called it health hatcheries. You started to have some unnecessary duplications of what was actually happening at the precinct levels, and so maybe you don't need that long term. And so some of these stood up and were then retired, and okay. And others are still yet to be established. For instance, do we need one in virtual care? Do we need one in adherence? Maybe that's an innovation. These are open for future development. Okay, so the one that was clearly indicated, if we start at clinical trials, then having a clinical trials environment that is slick and appropriate for ethical and governed and responsible delivery of clinical trials is an important platform, and probably won't be going anywhere. So now what they did was they funded staff into every single one of those CAGs, so that you had a project officer delivering and helping assist in those deliveries. So that's where your FTE was clustered. So the next strategy is to actually, and as I said, we were putting money into each of the CAGs, and so now what we need to do is put the money outside of the CAGs, and there should be enough maturity in this organisation after 6-7 years to be able to recognise the value and come towards the opportunity rather than wait for the opportunity to come to you. Does that make sense? So, and so we should be able to hop across and between CAGs around a funding opportunity that could go across the organisation. And instead of having the FTE embedded in the clinical academic group, you start to cluster that towards you start to bring the people towards the opportunity, and so that's the strategy going forward. So here's the implementation plan, and I'll go through this very, very quickly because the first goal is just to make the business of translation easier to do, okay? And a lot of this has been done in the first 7 years, okay? This all exists, but what doesn't exist and the opportunity that's ahead of us is that we have actually unlocked all of the data that sits inside Regis. So we've actually extracted all of the data from Regis. Once you've got that data, you actually know who's working with who on which project and where they are. That then means that you have the opportunity, this hasn't been done, but this is the implementation plan, that with the necessary approvals, this is all hypothetical because, you know, even council doesn't know about this yet, but enough people have seen it to say, put it in the plan and take it forward, which is that once you start to work across the partnership and start getting your grants management with your equipment registries and then even your publication outputs, you've basically created LinkedIn for research. That's actually a research social network. So we'd like to make the business of translation easier to do, but instead of trying to find a person that you want to do research with by ringing them up, you actually use modern methodologies, which is, you know, I don't know about you, but my kids, they're, 30, 33. They don't know what everything is ordered online, you know, from a pizza to a person, you know, it's just, right? It is. I mean Tinder, mate. It's swipe left, right. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? So if you want to find a partner, here's a research partner. What is it that makes them attractive to you? Okay, well, let's do that. Let's build that, right? Okay, so there's the first bit. The second is to foster targeted impacts on health and wellbeing. Do I need to wrap up? Have I gone too long? Okay. Foster targeted impacts on health and what we really want to do is build workforce participation. And so the reason I'm stressing this is what I'm highlighting today is brokers seed funding so that we identify either through philanthropy, foundations, state-based, don't always keep coming to Sphere to say, give me the money. It's where is the money? The money is outside us. How do we get you to grant success so that you know, even if $100,000 is required to seed fund, what really matters is how do I turn 100,000 into $1 million, right? How do we get you to the funding that is outside the organisation rather than what's in it? And so that does come down to this, you know, what is the missing link? And really concentrating on the near miss. You know, if you had a near miss application, what was it? What was the missing link about that? How do we get you up onto a podium finish if you came fourth, right? That's where that's the magic. And then the feedback I've got, and it's valid and I accept it, is this process runs the risk of disenfranchising our high-performing partnerships. They might not find anything in this organisation that is of value to them. But the one thing that we will always come back to is the implementation. So high-performing partnerships that will be looking for engagement into the to basically transform healthcare would find this as a vehicle to deliver change. How long will that take me? I reckon this is a 3-year fixer-upper. So we'll take that. You know, there are certain milestones. I think I'm, you know, over time. So I'll just get on to what the seed funding opportunities are. Basically, I can summarise it. It's really simple. It's what's the big idea? Tranche one is we're concentrating. There are 2 tranches of work. And it is, can we cluster around a health service problem, okay? If anybody's asked me as a clinician, take off the acting ED hat and just say, what's your problem as a health service delivery? You know, too many patients coming to the ED, can't get them out, can't get them through, you know, can we do this better? Others would say there are different problems, you know, vaccination rates and whatever, okay? So everybody would have a different list around that. So we have actually narrowed down on 4 or 5 health service priorities, and we'll cluster around those. And these were the 4 that we for this. But each year we'll set those health service priorities and see who clusters around them. So it's not actually disease based. So you should be able to get your CAG saying, yeah, I've got that problem in cancer and I've got that problem in cardiovascular. How do we work together to solve that problem for the benefit of both and by extension to the rest of the organisation, right? Tranche 2 then recognises that our academic partners are investigator initiated and they align more with the NH and MRC principles, which is I've still, you know, my cracking good idea doesn't really align with any of your health service priorities this year. Does that mean I've got to come back in 5 years' time or when, you know? So what we're doing is saying, great, if you've got these investigator-initiated ideas and a partner who's going that you want to partner with, we will be one of those co-partners, okay? And we're looking to co-fund so that you target that partnership granting process. What we know is that that's the highest funded granting program at about 30%. So we aim to outperform. If we do better than 30%, we're above the average, and that's the business we're in. I think that's enough for for the allocated time, and I'll take any questions if that's the forum.
Thanks, Chris. That was great. Really appreciate that. I haven't got any questions on the Slido, so just a reminder to do post your questions on Slido if you can. Any questions in the room? Not at the moment. Okay, so I might just take the chair's privilege and just ask one, Chris, if that's all right. So I was very interested in your distinction about, making translational research implementable and how important that is to Sphere. Can you just pinpoint what you see as the main barriers to implementation?
Oh my goodness. Dorothy Dixon. Well, what I would do in that situation is I would suggest that is actually a topic that you could bring back to here and get Sandy to talk to, right? But the barriers to implementation they're very site specific. You will find that what works at one site doesn't get engagement somewhere else. And often they're cultural, time. The thing is, it's not just money, okay? It's usually work practice, it's behaviour. If I had a magic wand, it would be a behaviour button. I will get this response. But we're such a complex species that bringing a change management, because you've got the evidence, you've got the proof, you just don't have the implementation.
Right.
And so that's usually would that be fair enough? What else? Anything else? Anyway, if I had a magic wand, it would be...
It's a loaded question. There is so much.
So much. So it's actually a really good topic to bring Sandy and the implementation platform back to say, well, these are our strategies.
Excellent. So then we have the August seminar.
But I've learned so much from watching the implementation sciences, and just as a plug for implementation science, right? It's often underfunded. It's a gap, and in the review of NHMRC funding and coordinating, there has to be dedicated or a commitment to a parcel that says this is for implementation, because if you do all this discovery, you've got no chance of making a difference if you do not get implementation. You don't fund that realistically. And it's seen as, I don't know, it just doesn't have the impact or the I don't know, I'm not going to use the right word, but it just doesn't seem to get the attention that it is actually going to require. But if you want to put discovery into practice, you better have that. Yeah. The second is actually they do not actually allocate a specified funding amount for biomedical and for innovation, right? And yet that if you want to do something spectacular, I'm talking to you. There's this dreadful a valley of death that and you just need that life support. Sure. To get a good idea into commercialisation. And if they don't put it, protect it, it will just atrophy.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Chris. Really appreciate that. Round of applause, Chris. Thank you. So over to Sam McFedries.
You've got all your bits?
Yep.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Chris. I'm just going to start off by saying a shout out to my mum, who's dialed in from New Zealand to listen to this today. So hi, Shaz. All right, so I'm Sam McFedries. I'm the Translational Research Lead for the Randwick Health and Innovation Precinct. I work really closely with Prof Adam Jaffe and Carolyn Sue, and also with Chris, and Professor Georgina Hold and Dr Paula Bray, who are the Directors of Research for South Eastern Sydney and SEHN respectively. A bit of history of me. I've got really strong connections to the precinct. I immigrated here in 2011 and accepted my first job with UNSW a few days later, so I've been here forever. I've been associated with the precinct since then, and as much as I whinge and moan, just ask Adam about that, I do love Randwick, and I really love the opportunities I have to work with all the brilliant minds that are here. So my role is complex in terms of governance. I tend to say I work for everyone, but at the same time I work for no one. I'm funded by UNSW, the LHD and SCHN. However, I'm employed by the Health Science Alliance. So yeah, work that one out. What's important though for people in the room and online to know is that I'm a resource to be leveraged by you, and also your teams. The overarching goal of my role is to implement the translational research strategy, which I've put a QR code to in the link towards the end of the presentation, and I'll circulate my slides anyway if you want to have a read of that. I also lead and manage activities and projects, some of which I'm going to outline in this presentation, and report to the precinct partners, and my aim is to improve research capacity and actively collaborate across our networks. So I'll give a wee bit of a summary of the precinct for anybody who's not too familiar. So it was established by 4 founding partners, namely SCHN, South Eastern Sydney LHD, UNSW and Health Infrastructure. The precinct maximises the benefits that come from being physically located with some of Australia's most reputable hospitals, together with the university and medical research institutes. This really allows us to leverage our research and technological expertise, and leads to significant positive impact on life and health. Co-location is a really big thing. It's really important for seamless care across patients' lifespan, and it essentially means we're thinking about a patient from preconception all the way through to the care of older adults, all in one location. The precinct currently has a workforce of around 22,000. It includes 7,000 people who are focused on research, and we have more than 1.8 million patient interactions per year. We also educate around 58,000 students, and we are a big, complex, and have enormous academic and clinical assets. I won't delve too much into the governance of the precinct, but I just thought I would show this just for context. It's a bit hard to see, it's quite small, but basically you can see we've got a number of working groups, one of which Steve leads, the Industry and Innovation, and the Translational Research one, which is where I sit. We also have education, creative placemaking, comms and advocacy. So you can see we're pretty broad. We're trying to cover as many bases as possible. And when you look at this, there are 144 representatives, so that's your individuals that sit across all of these groups, and they are from 14 organisations. We've got diversity of gender and employment experience levels, and there's also appropriate decision makers, so we can, do things top down or bottom up or wherever there's really good buy-in. And what it means is we're really driving a strong collaboration and innovative outcome-focused culture. So the Translational Research Working Group was established in 2019. Chris, who just spoke previously, prior to his appointment at Sphere, was the co-chair with Professor Adam Jaffe. The three of us, with consultation and input from 30 sub-working groups, developed and co-authored the Precinct's Translational Research Strategy. And again, there's a QR code towards the end that will take you to that strategy, which is available online if you want to have a read. When Chris accepted the appointment at Sphere, Carolyn Sue was appointed as co-chair. So Carolyn is the inaugural Kinghorn chair at Neura. She's a fantastic neurologist, has brought amazing expertise over here from the North Shore, including a number of neurologists. So it really just shows what a strength we have here of neurology and neurosciences. So as I mentioned, I'm a translational research lead, and I receive support from Paola Spagnoli down at UNSW with looking after the actions and decisions of the Translational Research Working Group. which is very helpful because having to participate in those meetings, it's always really hard to take notes and kind of do everything all at once. So I'm really appreciative to Paula. The working group currently has 22 members who have voting rights and make up the quorum, and then we have a further 18 invitees. The invitee list is constantly growing as more people become interested in our work and want to dial into the meetings. We kind of believe it's really important for collaboration to allow people to drop into those meetings. There's never anything really sensitive discussed or confidential, so it's really kind of the more the merrier to really extend our work and to get more people involved. So we have organisational representatives from across the groups you can see there, so the health and also from MRIs. We also have representatives across adults cancer, clinical trials, neuroscience, mental health and addiction, oncofertility, precision medicine, research imaging and women's health. And we also invite others from representatives from our other working groups, again just for communication and being able to know what each other's across, and also so that to avoid duplication. And then we also have a number of invitees, as mentioned, so that's a really broad list of different people who are either researchers themselves or, like Helen in the room, are in research support roles. So now I'll just kind of go through some of our projects and enablers that we're working on. So we've got all the contextual guff out of the way, and this is the real nitty-gritty of what the Translational Research Working Group and myself actually do. One point I'm really going to stress is Randwick is a precinct without borders. So the projects and enablers that I'm going to discuss are not limited to Randwick. We're very mindful that SCHN, South Eastern Sydney and UNSW are not wholly Randwick entities, and collaboration is of utmost importance. So that's particularly when it comes to resourcing and leveraging each other's subject matter strength, research methodological expertise. And in short, it means if you're at Westmead or if you're at St George or Sutherland, it doesn't mean you're limited from being involved in any of these projects. The ultimate goal is to have multi-centred research. So yeah, it's very important that we make the point that we're not bounded by geography. All right, so one of our major projects that we have running, which is being led by Adam, is the Australian Alliance for Rare Diseases. So we're trying to set up a person-centred partnership with Rare Voices Australia and other consumer advocacy organisations in the rare diseases space. This will be a national alliance. It will be led by Randwick, but very much representative of the country. We've recently set up a national working group which has people from interstate, leaders from Melbourne, WA, all involved, as well as consumer organisations as well. And the ultimate goal is for the Alliance to be the body accountable to the Department of Health and Ageing for their National Strategic Action Plan for Rare Diseases, which was released by former Minister Hunt in 2020. There is currently an opportunity to join a local rare disease sub-working group, which Adam is leading. So there's been a request for EOIs sent out via different methods. They close on the 16th of July. So if you're interested in becoming involved in that sub-working group, please jump on there. And if you haven't received the request for EOIs, just reach out to me and I can flick it to you. Because they close on Sunday. The first meeting of that sub-working group will be on the 3rd of August for people who are appointed. Another big project that we're working on is a Paediatrics and Child Health Research Centre, which has been adorably named PATCH. This is a joint facility of SCH and the LHD and UNSW, including collaboration with the MRIs. It will leverage SCH redevelopment stage 1, including the Maridulu Comprehensive Children's Cancer Centre and also the Neuroscience Comprehensive Centre as well, and the Health Translation Hub. It takes a life approach, so it's all about from preconception all the way through to transition to adulthood. So that's why it's really important that it's, we're working closely with the adult hospitals as well, and women's. Another project that we're working on is a precinct impact study. So just this week, Steve, myself and the rest of our team went over to St Leonard's, to the ministry, and had a workshop with health infrastructure looking at different metrics for measuring the impact of precincts. So that's quite a big piece of work, and it's exciting to be involved and be able to give that advice and test what New South Wales Health is looking at. So we can really be on the ground in the forefront of measuring our own impact. And the ultimate goal is to have a blueprint or a framework that measures the impact and value of health precincts that can be applied, across the state, but then also potentially taken nationally. Another one is we're working on an inter-precinct partnership, and this is in functional neurological disorder. We are working with John Hunter Innovation Precinct and also with Liverpool to come together and look at ways to improve care and research within functional neurological disorder. The prevalence of this is largely unknown, and so is the economic cost. Neurologists see numbers and numbers and numbers of people with FND every week, and that's not even counting what psychiatrists and things see, and it's really debilitating for people. Their quality of life is really impacted. So it's quite an important one to look at, and particularly to see how our different precincts can work together and leverage our different strengths to not work in isolation, because obviously there's not enough money or anything to go around. So the more we collaborate and come together, the better things are going to be and the more impact we're going to make. So this is a big partnership also with Mind Gardens and looking at extending Dr. Adith Mohan's multidisciplinary FND clinic. That's shown great success so far, and he's really trying to get more funding to continue that. So we're really trying to support that as much as possible. There is also a need to improve data collection and harmonisation and also establish a national registry. But then there's also the need to develop an education program for clinicians, but also for patients and carers. Right, now these are our enablers. So projects as well, but just these are more for getting research going, not research themselves. So we've been working on trying to leverage resources in clinical trials. This is a really tricky space, but there's a lot of knowledge that can be exchanged between the hospitals and the universities in this space to try and make things better and make Randwick a real destination for clinical trials. So we've held a number of workshops. A few people in the room and online will be involved with these. Anyone who's interested in being involved is more than welcome to reach out. And yeah, we always welcome different expertise because we can be really limited and have a bit of tunnel vision if we don't have all the right people in the room. So the idea for clinical trials is we want to develop an education program for clinical trial staff and also look at career pathways. So I went to a recent ARCS conference, and one part that they said is that a lot of people fall into clinical trial support or research support roles. There's not a lot of people that choose that as a career. I'd like to beg the differ, but I think that's really interesting to know and to see that, there is an opportunity to establish true career pathways there, and particularly since there's a real shortage of clinical trialists and clinical trial support staff worldwide. So whether we can close that gap by, leaning on the university, leaning on the hospitals to try and come up with an education program or, to try and look at some secondments or internships or whatever to really make it a true career. We're also aligning with the National Clinical Trials Governance Framework, and we want to try and support hospitals as much as possible with their accreditation. So that's another thing that we're looking at, that even, these education type areas, making sure that aligns and that the correct evidence is going to be provided so that it can support whatever the hospital needs to submit to be accredited. All right, now, when Chris was speaking, he spoke a little bit about data. And this is kind of his baby, the Research and Operational Data Environment, or ROAD. It sits within Sphere, but it's the LHD owns part of the IP as well as the creator Manuel, and I think Chris may even be involved there as well. So what ROAD is, it's a really cool tool. It's only in stage 2, almost in stage 2 of development, but basically it has the ability to link EMR, registries, virtual care, AI data all together in real time. So we recently submitted an MRFF application which focused on dementia. We're still awaiting the embargo on that, or the outcome. And what that meant is that a patient who, when they're discharged, could be monitored in the home for medication adherence and use that as a readmission risk rating. That data would be fed into the EMR, so then clinicians could be alerted to try and get onto primary care and make sure that that person was looked out for to try and reduce readmission. But then also that data would flow directly into the registry, the Australia Dementia Registry, without people the clinicians having to enter another set of data, which is such a timely process and also can lead to discrepancies and incompleteness. So it's a really quite a cool tool. Once it's fully functional, the true nature of it will be interesting to see. As Chris mentioned, they've already scraped all the data from Regis in LHD, so they can now map all the different projects that are going on and who's working with who and do like a social networking analysis. So then it's telling you, if you can go on there, it actually exists online now, but you can go on, say you want to look at a project in asthma, you can see all the projects that have been approved, who's working on them and who's working with who, and that's when you get into Chris's kind of Tinder, LinkedIn part, that you can contact that person and say, look, I want to collaborate, or I want to know more about what you're doing. This is a priority of the district and of Sphere and of Mine Gardens. Mine Gardens provided stage 1 funding from a Commonwealth grant, so they are very much committed to road. There is an opportunity here that if you want to learn more about this technology, I would reach out to Chris or to Rena Ward. I can put you in touch with both and see whether it's a tool that can be used for your own research, or if you're just interested in hearing more about what it is and what it does. Another one we're working on is a research passport. So the idea of this is to try and improve the contingent worker process and to make it easier to move between the hospitals. Because obviously you look at Randwick, we can walk through 5 different hospitals, but we can't. So it's about trying to improve that for research. So we're not saying we're going to change anything with governance in terms of SSAs, but just to make it easier that, if you have a contingent worker or an appointment with SCHN, it'd be great if the LHD accepted that and you didn't have to go through all the paperwork all over again to get contingent worker status there. So that's what we're trying to do. It's, as I say, it's a bit of a foot in the door process. You would still have to be subject to ethics and governance applications. And yeah, it's more just focusing on that kind of HR pathway. But it's a very kind of risks and what element of risk and how much trust do the hospitals have in each other. That's going to be the real basis for that one. So we had one workshop in March. What that's led to is that Chrysalis Advisory have been working on research credentialing with the PN and with SCHN, and they will be potentially piloting a research credentialing or passport towards the end of the year / early next year, and we've put our hands up to be the pilot for that. But that's kind of our long term. In the short term, we're just trying to work on setting this up between SCHN and the LHD and UNSW. Originally, St Vincent's was involved as well, but it's been a little bit tricky with them because they operate completely differently to everyone else. They don't use StaffLink. Their research office manages their contingent worker processes, not HR or people and culture. So there's a few more barriers in that one, but we're not closing the door completely. It'll still be in there because we again think that's a good way to kind of have a bit of an eastern suburbs connection and again make it easier to do multi-site research and travel between the hospitals. Growing Great Ideas is my baby. I'll go into this in a bit more depth shortly, but basically it's a key opportunity for anyone in this room or online to access research development support. The goal is we want to support high quality external research funding applications that incorporate the partners and the collaborators and ideally increase the number of research funding that's received. It's composed of a research concept pitch to the Translational Research Working Group, knowledge exchange, which is basically using me as Translational Research Lead, and also wanting to set up a research professional or support staff network. And it's open to anyone affiliated to the precinct, which, as I said before, it's not if you're a SCHN or a LHD employee, that's an affiliation. It doesn't matter whether you're at St George or at Westmead, you're still a part of us. Excluding the research professional staff network, I want that to be kind of Sydney-wide once it's all up and running. Another one, the last one that we're also working on is research at Randwick. So we are branding November as Research at Randwick Month. There's a heap of different events that always occur in November. So it seemed like a little bit of a no-brainer, but to come together, have some kind of overarching branding, and really co-promote all the different events that are happening. So it's not changing individual ownership or individual branding of the events themselves. It's just basically a marketing exercise to be able to get comms out further. So that's something to keep an eye out for in November. The calendar is filling up really fast with different events that are happening. Our Precinct website launches next week, so I think following that we'll start to get something put online as well and really push all those different events. The opportunity for that one is if you have anything happening in November and you want to be involved and have it communicated, reach out. Or if you're planning on organising something, then also yell out. I've put together a calendar already, which shows all the different events happening. So if you want to try and avoid clashing with anybody to increase your audience, I'm happy to share that with anyone as well. On that note, I'm going to give a bit of a plug for the TOE Research Awards, which happen in November. So they will be opening for abstracts on the 1st of August. There's a number of awards, divisions of awards. So there's basic science, case presentation, clinical, and ILP, and also nursing, midwifery, and allied health. These are for early career researchers. So basically, the definition we've chosen for that is, no more than 5 years post-PhD or 5 years post-advanced training. The prizes are really good. So you get about $1,000 for coming first, depending on what division. Otherwise, posters, you can win $250, but then the winner can also travel. So you get up to $2,500 to go to an international conference. So it's really worthwhile. And it's a really great day. It's going to be held in this lecture theatre. We will also be streaming it online as well to do, again, just kind of increase the audience, but also that knowledge exchange too, and introduce different people. The abstracts will close on the 31st of August, and then we aim to let people know by the end of September. So for the awards day that takes place, I think, when is it? 10th of November. So it gives you enough time to kind of get your presentation and everything together. All right, so growing great ideas. So this was basically conceived from a year of engagement with researchers and constantly hearing, we've got great ideas, we don't know how to develop it, we don't know how to build a research team, we're missing this kind of expertise or methodological experience. So myself and the Translational Research Working Group decided that, there is something that we could do. The working group meets monthly. We have really good turnout. And it's quite a high-level committee. There's a number of, top researchers on there. And so there's opportunity there for junior researchers to be exposed to that kind of experience. So that was kind of how this all came together. So the goal is, as I said, support development of high-quality applications. We want to increase successful projects and funding received. We want to make research development support accessible and available in a timely fashion. And we also, in turn, want to build the skills and expertise of researchers, but also research support staff. So it is built on 3 elements. So the first one is the research concept pitch. As I mentioned, this is a standing item at the working group meetings, gives people the opportunity to present or discuss their idea or concept. The concepts can be presented prior to deciding on a funding scheme. They're limited to 5 minutes, 5 slides with additional time for discussion. Investigators are asked to prepare at least 3 questions for the working group to help answer. And this could be, where to find expertise, how to build the team to answer the research question, how to access services or participants, questions on study design, methodology, and also funding schemes to consider amongst, a number of other questions that could be asked. As I said, the working group is largely senior researchers. So it's really priceless intellectual input into development of concepts. So you can imagine, if you're a junior postdoc or maybe not even a postdoc, maybe a clinician researcher, having access to that is really important, particularly for mentoring and, learning more about the research process. We will also help support investigators to link in with consumers and advocacy groups because web co-design is so important, and we really want to push that. Another thing we really want to push is making sure you remunerate those people as well. So when you're building your budgets for an application, making sure there are budget lines in there following either, New South Wales consumer guidelines or even New South Wales Health recently released guideline, which I think came out in April. The other one is knowledge exchange. So as I said, that's me. And it's further kind of budget and strategic advice as you develop a proposal. My role is basically as a conduit. So I will kind of link you in to different discipline or method experts and help build the team. But I also can link you in with the likes of, say, Helen at SCHN, who's a research development manager, or counterparts at the district or at the university. So it might not necessarily be me, but, I'm just here to kind of say, look, this person will be able to help you better, or otherwise I will help you. One of the outputs is I do want to put together a catalogue of people and organisations, so where to go for stats advice, where to go for health economists, where to go for implementation scientists. So that will kind of probably be more on next year's agenda because this year seems to be going far too fast. And again, that would be just another way to be able to look and see who you can link in and how you can collaborate and build a better application. And again, as I mentioned, it does include referral to existing structures within other organisations. I don't want to duplicate anything. I don't want to, take away from anything that's already happening elsewhere. This is really just for people who don't know where to go, who don't have strong academic ties and just want a little bit of help along the way. As much as getting researchers to collaborate, us research support staff are also really trying to collaborate and, be across what each other is doing and, meet regularly and all of that. So it's not like there's a competition or anything like that. As I mentioned, also I want to build a research professional support staff network. And this is really just a kind of informal Teams channel, a few maybe BYO lunches or education sessions and a forum to kind of knowledge share. So, research support staff are really diverse. You might have a background in ethics or governance or, like me, research development. And so there's so many different skills that we can share amongst each other to build our own knowledge bases. So that's kind of my idea with this. It also comes from working for 14 years in research support, and it's lonely. There's not many of us around. They're generally geographically dispersed. So it's a bit of peer support as well. So hopefully, towards the end of the year, we'll have our first events coming up for that. So I'm nearing the end. Probably sick of my voice. I am. This is how you get involved with Growing Great Ideas. So if you want to pitch a concept to the Translational Research Working Group, you submit a form on MS Forms. Our next meeting is on the 28th of July. It's generally the fourth Friday of every month at 11 a.m. So the only month that we don't have one is December, obviously, because, that'll fall probably after Christmas, and I'm not coming in. Knowledge exchange, you can contact me either on health or UNSW on both teams and that as well. And any just general questions, I'm really happy to talk with anybody and, share my corporate knowledge or, have a chat. And if you want to join the Research Support Professional Staff Network, there's also another MS form there as well. But like I say, I'll send this all out to everybody following the presentation, probably tomorrow. But yeah, that is me. Any questions?
Yeah,
we're good.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, no, there haven't been any questions come up on Slido, but maybe Sam, I was just going to ask you quickly, since I asked Chris an impossible question, can I ask you one? So it's interesting, Chris's point was making, building workforce participation. Well, how do we leverage the precinct to build workforce participation in translational research and kind of make people, convince people that translational research can be an activity that everyone can engage in?
Yeah, I think that's a really big part of what we're trying to do, and I think it's a bit top down for a start. I mean, it's really, we need to make research as core business of health. I think universities do that really well, obviously, but it's really embedding research into the hospitals. And I know one thing that Adam's always wanted to do is have, every PD include research or a component of research. So that's kind of one aspect of it. I think the other is kind of what we're trying to do in clinical trials, and look at, different career pathways, offer opportunities for secondments and internships. So, nurses coming across and wanting to do a bit of clinical trial work, or, biomed or basic scientists coming up and doing internships within the hospitals as well. I know that's something Children's Cancer Institute's interested in doing as well. So I think, I think it's a resourcing thing. We need some time to sit down and dedicate to it. But I mean, I don't by any means think it's not an opportunity, and we will get there. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Sam. So we'll close it there, and thanks very much for attending online and in the room.